Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. It is Wednesday. Hope you guys have had a great week so far. I took yesterday off to get some things done, but we're back. We're going to jump in. But first, if you're watching on YouTube, you know the drill. Subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video, share it with your friends, and ring that bell if you want notifications of when I upload new content. Music fact of the day. What hit song of his did Frank Sinatra hate? He hated Strangers in the Night. Before he would sing it, he would often say, "Here's a song that I cannot stand," before going on to play it. All right, we are jumping back in. I really don't have a lot of rhyme or reason to the order these episodes are going to go in. I'm just watching and making notes. And then if something comes up, I kind of go off on the side to learn more, and we'll get through it. But we are jumping back at Katie and Sigfredo's joint trial in 2019. When Wendi was asked by prosecutor Kappelman about the motion Dan filed asking that Donna only have supervised visits with the boys, after one of his sons said she was making disparaging remarks about him, Wendi said she doesn't remember that and that she would have to look at the filing. When asked if her divorce situation affected her family, she said she thinks that they felt bad for what she was going through. She doesn't remember any statements made by her son saying that grandma says you're trying to take her sunshines away. And after a few questions, when asked again about the motion and if it was still pending when Dan was shot and killed, that motion to only have Donna visit the boys with supervised visitation, Wendi says that it's possible it was pending. But she goes on to say she doesn't think anybody took it seriously, and she doesn't think her mom took it seriously. She said she probably would have shown that motion to her mother. And when asked if it's fair to say your mom, dad, and brother are protective of you, Wendi says yes. Now, at the retrial for Katie, Wendi couldn't remember if the motion was even ruled on or not. She said it would be in here as she flips through the pages the prosecutor gave her to refresh her memory. The prosecutor reminds her it was scheduled to be ruled on in August, the month after Dan was shot and killed. When asked if her family liked Dan, "You said at the police station your parents were angry with him." Wendi said they were because they felt he treated her badly. At Katie and Sigfredo's joint trial, the prosecutor brings in the emails that we went over on Monday in that episode and asked Wendi about the nickname that Donna gave Dan, which is derogatory, and I won't say here. Wendi said it was a nickname she herself gave Dan when he was being difficult and causing her a lot of pain. And she said she did that to make him feel less threatening. She said she did not call him that name to his face. She called him Danny. Well, the judge asked, "How do you spell that name?" to Wendi. And she said she doesn't know if she ever spelled it out and says it could be with a G or a J. But prosecutor Kappelman pipes in and says, "You have him stored in your phone as that name," and then proceeds to spell it out to Wendi. Then Wendi says that's right. At Katie's retrial, prosecutor Kappelman asked, did she call Dan names, meaning Donna? Wendi doesn't remember. So the prosecutor hands Wendi those emails, and the prosecutor asked if Donna referred to Dan as an a-hole, a bully, a religious zealot, a jackass, and also that derogatory name. Wendi says it wasn't a derogatory name, but she admits Donna did call Dan some of those things. Prosecutor Kappelman brings in their big divorce file and asked if it was a contentious divorce. Now, in the retrial for Katie, the one thing I noticed is that Wendi would say a lot of really negative things about Dan that she really didn't say in that first trial. And Wendi said it was made more difficult by Dan, who didn't want to get divorced. The prosecutor points out one thing in the file, the motion to relocate, and asks, "Why were you seeking to move?" Wendi said she wanted more stability, and Dan never intended to stay in Tallahassee. It was only a matter of time before he moved to New York to be with his girlfriend or his dream of being at Harvard. She said Tallahassee was a temporary stopping place for Dan. In South Florida, she had family support and she worked immigration. So there were a lot of career opportunities for her there in South Florida. But remember, in another trial, she said she was relieved when the motion was denied and that she liked Tallahassee. She said the relocation was not the most important part of their divorce. And when asked if it was the most non negotiable term, that was the prosecutor referring to Donna's statements in one of those emails. Wendi said it was most important to Donna because she was looking forward to having her daughter and her grandchildren home. Now, Jeff Lacasse, that's Wendy's ex boyfriend, testified at Katie's retrial that there were always two topics of conversation that was had daily with Wendi. The first, how much she hated Dan, and second, how much she hated living in Tallahassee. He said Wendi blamed Dan for her getting stuck there. The prosecutor shows Wendi Dan's response to that motion to relocate and asked if there was a lot in that motion. Wendi said, I imagine so, because at some point, Dan fired or alienated all of his attorneys through the process, and then he started doing his own legal work. When asked if he was adamantly opposed to Wendi taking the boys to Miami, Wendi said, that's what he says here. And it's different from the conversations the two of them had about it. And that large filing is what the judge sanctioned Dan for. Again, just throwing in things, I think, to make this jury look a little poorly at Dan, who they're not going to look poorly at a father who was shot for wanting to be in his kids' lives. Prosecutor says Dan says the sole reason she seeks to relocate is to be closer to her parents, and you don't agree? Wendi said that wasn't the sole reason, but it was a reason to help create stability. When asked, was your mom following these proceedings closely? Wendi says she was definitely being over involved, but at another trial, she said Donna was informed of the decision the judge made denying that relocation, but Donna wasn't privy to the ins and outs of that divorce litigation. We know that's not true. At Charlie's trial, Wendi is asked if she remembers the emails her mom sent her, the ones we went over on Monday. Well, Wendi says it's been 10 years, so she looks them over and says she doesn't think that she responded to those. The prosecutor reads the part about Harvey changing his patients' schedules around so that he was able to spend more time with the children after the separation. And she asked if there were issues surrounding her litigation that negatively impacted their business. Wendi says that's what it says in the email. The prosecutor reads the part about Charlie buying the business from Harvey and paying him monthly. This is an argument your mom is proposing to persuade the courts to allow relocation due to the financial impacts it had on them. And Wendi says yes. All these are going to probably come in at Donna's trial because it really paints her in a light of not just being overly involved, but being obsessively involved to the point to where in those emails, like we mentioned, she would speak as if she was Wendi saying these things. She was telling Wendi exactly what to say. And I don't think that's somebody who's just informed about a decision of the relocation. That's somebody who's all up in it. And you have Wendi saying at one trial, not really, and then overly involved at this joint trial was her testimony. The prosecutor says there's a part saying the rest of your life in bold. And it says your life, Dad's, and even Charlie's will be impacted based on how well you can perform. Dan hasn't beaten the Adelsons yet. And the prosecutor goes on to say your mom is referencing how everyone is being affected by the relocation not being allowed. Is your mom overprotective of you? Is she a little on the controlling side? Wendi says she wouldn't say controlling, but she is overprotective. When asked if she ever tried to micromanage her life, Wendi says maybe, yeah. At Katie's retrial, the prosecution asked Wendi what Donna suggested she could do to facilitate relocation. Wendi says change the boy's religion, bribe him. And Wendi says she doesn't know the amount, so the prosecution gives her a paper to review. And she says as high as $1 million, $333,000 each from Donna, Harvey, and Charlie. And the reason I'm kind of going back over this issue, which we covered on Monday, is because this was brought up in these trials. So it's a little bit of a preview of some of the things we're going to be hearing again in Donna's trial. I'm just curious, does Donna take the stand like Charlie? Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Did her attorney learn with Charlie? Bad idea? Or do you think Donna's going to insist? Going to be very curious to see. But Wendy said Donna was very upset when the judge denied that relocation. When asked at Katie's retrial about Dan wanting to keep the boys kosher and if that was important to her, Wendy said it's not, but it started to supersede other things that are important, like love and trust. Wendy's asked if she's aware her parents have a safe with stacks of cash, and she said she was not aware of that. At the joint trial back in 2019, Wendy was asked about the celebration dinner where she vomited on the table. Wendy said after Dan's murder, she was scared someone would come for her or her kids, and she didn't leave her house for a month. When she was ready, she told Charlie she was ready to go out to eat. She said, I had barely eaten for a month out of grief and shock. They sat us at the bar, and I wasn't used to eating or drinking alcohol, and I threw up, but it certainly wasn't a celebration. At Katie's retrial, she's asked about this, and when asked if Charlie referred to this as a celebration dinner, Wendy said he may have been celebrating the fact that she was willing to leave the house. But at Charlie's trial, Jeff Lacasse said that Wendy went out to what Charlie called a celebration dinner, but it wasn't specified as to what was being celebrated. At that same trial for Charlie, prosecutor Kappelman asked if Donna would have Charlie talk to her in regards to what Donna wanted Wendy to do as far as dating. Wendy says she can't think of an example of that. The prosecution says you dating a man named Dave was a big one. Wendy kind of smiles and says, everyone liked Dave, but we were just friends. This is the wiretap call. I think I have that one up where Donna and Charlie talk about what Wendy should be doing in regards to Dave. Charlie says he's going to talk to her. I believe he said he did talk to her at one point. The prosecutor said that Donna was getting Charlie to convince you to date Dave. Wendy says, I don't think so. When asked if Donna manipulates the lives of her children, Wendy says no. If your mom is really upset about something, is Charlie going to hear all about that? Wendy says if she's upset with me, Charlie's going to hear it. And if she's upset with Charlie, then I'm going to hear it. At Katie's retrial, Wendy's asked how long she stayed in Tallahassee after Dan was killed. She said a couple of days. And after she asked for protection at the memorial or at her home and law enforcement refused, it was then she went to Miami. At Katie's retrial, she's asked about meeting Katie, and she met her at a dinner with Charlie. And she and Katie met for another time at the beach for about an hour. They showed the photo on the screen, and I've got it up here on YouTube now. She said Charlie and Katie didn't seem serious to her, and she didn't bond with Katie as much as she did other girlfriends. Charlie told Wendy that Katie had an ex, Sigfredo, who he considered to be scary. She did talk to Charlie about her marital problems back in 2013 and 2014, but he wasn't focused on it. He was living his life. The prosecution asked about Donna, and Wendy says that Donna was focused on Wendy's life. Wendy says Charlie made a joke to one person about it being cheaper to buy a TV rather than hire a hitman. And when asked if he said it to more than one person, Wendy says Charlie has a habit of repeating himself, so definitely, twice at least. And she confirms she did get a TV as a divorce present from Charlie. Y'all, we know that boy repeats himself nonstop. At Katie's retrial, Wendy is asked if she thinks her family was involved in Dan's murder, and she says no. But the prosecution brings up what Wendy said in her police interview, saying that her family could be behind this. Wendy said she speculated about lots of things in the 6 hours she spent with law enforcement without an attorney present and just trying to help them solve this murder. I said a lot of things. The prosecutor said, but you said someone in your family could have done this on your behalf, unbeknownst to you. Wendy said, I did say I thought someone might have done this on my behalf. Well, I went back and looked at Wendy's police interview from the day Dan was shot. And the investigator says, let me ask, if you found out this was someone you personally know who did this, would it change your opinion on what should happen to that person? Wendy says, what would happen to that person? And the investigator says for prosecution purposes. And Wendi is kind of silent. She kind of looks into the distance, turns her head, and says, no, someone tried to kill my ex husband. They should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The investigator says, regardless of who it is, Wendi says, I mean, it would be different if I thought it was my brother, but I don't think it was my family. Anyone outside my immediate family, that's a tough one, but I don't think my immediate family did this. So if it's anybody else, yeah. The investigator asked, do you think Charlie would be capable of doing something like this? Wendi said, no, he's a jokester. Another thing that stood out to me about that interview, and I went back and watched it again, is when Wendi calls her mother, Donna. And after that phone conversation, she tells the victim's advocate she was relieved to hear that Donna was shocked about Dan being shot or something to that effect. So there's that. Back to the retrial of Katie. She's asked, did your brother know anybody who had connections to do this? And do you know Katie? Prosecution shows that photo of Wendi, Katie, and Katie's friend on the beach. It was taken Father's Day weekend just before Dan was killed. She said she doesn't know about any gifts that Charlie gave Katie after Dan's murder. And when asked if she was aware Katie was getting checks through the Adelson Institute, Wendi says, I know she worked for my dad for a while, so it would make sense that she was on the payroll. But Wendi doesn't know what Katie did there. When asked how she knew how Katie worked there, Wendi says, my brother probably told me she was working there, but she doesn't know if it was before or after the murder. When asked if Charlie liked Dan before his death, Wendi said, I think he would listen to me when I was upset at the time of the divorce. But did he mention hiring a hitman? No. He did make the joke, buying that new TV would be cheaper. For me, y'all, this whole TV thing's been a big question mark. TVs aren't that expensive, and they weren't back in 2014. Why even bother repairing when you can just go buy a new one? But that brings us into the next part of this, which is the TV appointment that Wendi had the morning Dan was shot and killed. And Jeff Lacasse said between June 11th and 18th, he's not sure of the day, but he knew it was within that time frame. He went to Wendy's to have a movie night with her and the boys. And when he got there, Wendi asked him to look at the TV because she said something was wrong with it. He turned it on and realized it had been struck with an object and it was basically unusable. He said to him, it looked like somebody stood in front of it and punched it with their fist. He said there was an impact crater and the picture was pixelated and distorted and really just unwatchable. At first, he thought maybe the kids broke it, but it didn't seem plausible because the boys were really small and whatever broke the TV had to be kind of heavy. He said he had thrown a ball around with the boys at one point, and he just didn't see how they could have been the ones to break that TV. He said there was another TV in the back room they had used to watch TV with the boys on before that night. So Jeff went to go hook up the DVD player in that back room, and Wendi said it wouldn't work, and she stopped him. He thought it was kind of odd, but he really didn't think much about it past that. So they proceeded to watch the movie on a broken TV. He said it worked enough to follow what was happening, but the boys were whining and crying the whole time. And he said it was frustrating. He didn't understand. He told Wendi, it's unwatchable. It's not covered by warranty. So let me just go buy you a new one from Best Buy. He offered to buy her a new one several times, and she turned him down. He said it was an inconvenience for a while because after dinner, you would plop the kids in front of the TV while you clean the dishes, and they're watching this broken TV. He said the TV was nothing fancy or expensive and compared it to something you would maybe find in a dorm room. Back to Katie's retrial. Did he buy you a new TV? Speaking of Charlie, she said yes. And when asked, is that the same TV that was being repaired at the time your husband was being murdered? Wendi says yes. So the day of Dan's murder, Wendi said she was home working on some writings and waiting for the Geek Squad to come fix her TV. That same one Charlie bought for her. When asked who made the arrangements for that TV repair, Wendi says me. And the prosecutor says your mom didn't, and Wendi says I don't think so. When asked if Donna arranged from Miami for the Geek Squad to come to your house, Wendi says no. And the prosecution is like, let's review some text messages. And Wendi says, I don't really understand. Her best recollection is she herself set the appointment up. She said, "This happens sometimes now. There's a different number on the account, and they could have called my mom." And she said, "No, call my daughter. They need to confirm with you." The prosecutor said, "But your mom indicates she is sending the guy." Wendi says, "No, she indicates she was called by Best Buy. So that means that she was called by accident. They were coming to my house." Wendi said that wasn't anything Donna would normally do, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that Donna would try to help her with various things. Wendi distinctly remembers setting the appointment up and said there was a window between 8 a.m. and noon for them to arrive. The prosecution asked Wendi, "Was Dan killed between 8 and noon?" Wendi says she doesn't remember the exact time it happened, but she thinks Dan was shot closer to 10 or 11. And the prosecution just circles back and says, "Buddy was shot between 8 and noon." Wendi says yes. When asked if she had that appointment in her calendar under fixed TV, Wendi said she did. She thought they were supposed to come between 8 and noon, and she said they came pretty early, I think around 9 or something like that. When asked if she deleted that entry for that appointment to have the TV fixed, Wendi says she's OCD. So when she has a meeting, she'll delete the event, so she must have deleted it sometime after the Geek Squad came. Well, the Geek Squad came and tried to fix the TV. Wendi said she had to make the call if it was worth the money to get it fixed or just buy a new one because the repair costs were too expensive. She said at that point, the TV was a couple of years old and one of the kids threw something at it and it cracked. Going back to those texts, who did you send the message to that says, "So sweet"? Wendi says her brother, Charlie. The prosecution asked, "Did you delete that message?" And Wendi says, "Yeah, I delete my messages as well." The prosecution asked if she knew what that meant. And Wendi says, "8 years ago, I have no idea what I meant when I said that was sweet." I was just looking over some of the calls the day of the murder. So we know around 9, the repair guys there at Wendy's house. There's more in the timeline of calls, but I'm really kind of focusing on the Adelsons with a couple of other calls thrown in for context. At 12:34 a.m. before the murder, Katie calls Charlie. The duration is less than a minute. An interesting one, at 1:02 a.m., Charlie calls Donna. And then at 1:03, Charlie calls Katie with a duration of 20 minutes. At 8:09 a.m., Donna contacts Wendi. The duration of that is 35 seconds. 8:11 a.m., Donna to Wendi. "Best Buy just called me, but I told them to confirm with you. They are on their way over now to help with the TV sets in your living room." Very specific, right? At 8:20 a.m., Wendi texts Charlie, "This is so sweet." That's that deleted text. Now at 8:50, Dan drops the kids off at preschool. Then at 9:02 a.m., Dan is at the gym. And of course, we know on surveillance, we see that Prius with Sigfredo and Rivera following him in there. 9:12, Charlie contacts Wendi for less than a minute. 9:19, Wendi calls Charlie and they talk for over 18 minutes. 9:38, Charlie calls Donna. The duration of that's 30 seconds. 20 minutes later, 9:58, Charlie calls Katie. The duration of that is over 6 minutes. 10:07 a.m., Katie calls Charlie for 9 seconds. And then a minute later, at 10:08 a.m., Katie calls Charlie and they talk for over a minute. Now, between 10:52 and 10:55, Dan's neighbor hears gunshots and sees that Prius leaving Dan's house. 11:06. Either Donna tries to call or text Charlie, but it doesn't look to be successful. So at 11:22 a.m., Charlie calls Donna and they talk for 7 minutes. 11:30, Charlie calls Katie for 30 seconds, and then again at 11:31 a.m., and they talk for 5 minutes. At 7:52 p.m. that evening, Donna to Charlie, "Call us ASAP." 8:59 p.m. is that text from Donna that was just argued about at the motions hearing outside your house. When asked if Charlie said he looked into all possible options for hiring a hitman, no. But I went back to Jeff Lacass's testimony at that joint trial of Katie and Sigfredo. He goes through their breakup at the end of June and said he had a conversation with Wendi on July 13th, 2014. That would be 5 days before Dan was murdered. He said Wendi had just returned from being in South Florida for 2 weeks and they were talking about their relationship. He says Wendi has a habit of just blurting things out. And she said Wendi asked if she could tell him something confidential. She proceeds to tell him that last summer in 2013, when the relocation got denied, her brother Charlie looked at various ways to fix the situation with Dan. And one of those was he looked into hiring a hitman. Now, Jeff wasn't sure if Wendi said it would cost $15,000 or $50,000, but he said it was a chilling statement. And he said the hitman was mentioned specifically in response to Wendi losing her motion to relocate. And that denial was what led Charlie to look into hiring a hitman. In that same conversation, Wendi told Jeff if something ever happened to Dan, she would be able to move back to Miami. So, for those of you that know this case well, this is nothing new, but I'm really just trying to zero in on things that I think are going to be very, very relevant in Donna's trial, along with what we don't know. There was something put on the portal earlier today. I'm going to go through those, and tomorrow, if there are any updates, I'll let you know, by the way. But Charlie's former attorney, Michael Weinstein, says he shouldn't have to give a deposition for Donna's trial due to attorney-client privilege and work product privilege. Charlie was seeking advice from him at the time he was named as a co-conspirator. So we'll see what the judge rules on that. And I'm also keeping an eye out for these outstanding motions he's yet to rule on that were addressed at this recent motions hearing. I really like going back into things before we get close to trial. I do crash courses for each big trial we cover just to get us ready. I hope you guys are finding this helpful. Like I said in the last episode, it's so easy to get caught up in the drama of everything. And then you forget these really big issues that are certainly going to be more pertinent to Donna than some things were to Charlie and whatever else they have up their sleeve we don't know about. But this is going to be one for the books. I'm telling you, Donna definitely has learned some self-control since that first appearance where the judge had to tell her to let her attorney do their job and she needs to calm it down. But I think once we get into trial and all these things are being testified about her that are not pretty, I'm curious to see if she's able to maintain her composure, or are we going to see some more of the judge telling Donna, sit down, be good, let your lawyer do the work. So we're getting there, y'all. We are less than 2 weeks now away from her trial. Again, just a reminder, I'll be live streaming every single day. Come watch every night, recapping that day's testimony in an hour or less. So, all right, guys, that's it for today. Hope you have a good rest of your evening. We'll see you soon.